RJ, it is always great to catch up with you. I've just shared with RJ a bit of bad news that I've had just before we, the live audience got to hear the bad news. The podcast audience can be freed of it. Who knows? I might chuck it in the intro. But hopefully you will see that this man makes me very happy. So hanging out with this person makes me very, very happy. So today, even on a dark day, I can't think of a better person to spend my time with. RJ, for the people who haven't heard the first episode of the podcast, I'd love it if you could give us a little kind of the bullet points of what we talked about last time, because really I want to get into what the last year or so has brought for you. But for those who haven't listened to it, but also they can go back and listen to it. But can you just kind of give us the whistle stop tour?
Yeah. So my name is RJ Zimmerman. I have a podcast called Untapped Keg. I do more than that, but also about to be an alcohol-free life coach. I have not drank in over 9 years. I quit drinking to start a family, and I have 2 boys who are 5 and 3. Just moved about a year and a half ago across the country of the United States. I grew up in Wisconsin, which is like the biggest drinking culture in the United States. It's not just like, it is like by far. And I moved to Virginia, to the East Coast, to have a better culture to raise my kids in. And then the ironic thing about stopping drinking to start a family is I am going through the divorce process right now, and have been going through it for about 3 years, but this year's been the separation, and then August it'll be official. So that has started that. I was a high voltage line tech for about 10 years too. So I worked on high voltage power lines for a utility company.
Cool. So again, just what you said you stopped drinking for the family. At what stage did it become for you? Or has it?
No, it has. It has. I'm
just 9 years. It's got to
when that transition occurred. It was probably around year two or 3 is when it became more for me, and I really saw the benefits of the career that I chose, but also just not having to worry about what was going on the next morning, because I was going to be able to be up and functioning and there for it. So,
yeah. Do you remember what it was that kind of made you make that switch and go, oh, I don't have to do this for other people?
No. Like, I would say the conscious switch of stopping to do things for other people has really been the past year and a half, 2 years. Before then, it was just like kind of happened, but it definitely wasn't a conscious switch over.
Okay. So you said obviously you're now working towards becoming a alcohol-free life coach. Like what's brought you to that point?
It was the podcast, honestly, that I started a little bit over 3 years ago. I like being able to help people. That's part of the main reason that I like being a line tech, was I was helping people get their power back. And I started the podcast with my brother-in-law originally to let people know they're not alone going through this journey, because sobriety and not drinking is very isolating. Even if you have a great support system around you, anytime you go out and you're not drinking, you still feel off to the side and there's things that you're worried about, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to help people find the freedom that I've found, especially the past year. And so in finding that, the program that I'm going through, being an alcohol-free life coach, really made the most sense, and the values just aligned perfectly with what I've been kind of promoting at Untapped Keg. So it lined up.
So what have been the big changes for you in this past year?
Oh, wow. Feeling my feelings, like number one, being able to name what emotions I'm feeling. And then after that, it's been changing my internal dialogue completely. A little bit over a year and a half ago, like I identified that every action that I had, every reaction was based in self-loathing, a deep sense of self-loathing that I didn't even know I was doing it. The only reason I caught it was because I was holding it against my kids that they love me. That was how I caught it.
Right.
I was starting to think, how can they love such a piece of shit? And like kind of look down on them a little bit. And I was like, wait a second, what is that? And I started to think about all the people that love me and have been there for me. And I've always felt alone, even with people that I know love me. That's when I've really felt the most alone, to be honest, is with people who they say and they show, and I know at a certain level that they love me, but I just feel isolated and alone and lonely. And really it's because I hated myself to such a degree that I didn't even know that that's what it was. So working to get myself from this self-loathing to just self-okay has really been a process this year, right?
Yeah.
And we could say self-like and self-love, but I'm okay with just being okay with myself. And after I realized that, when I would look in the mirror, I noticed I would recoil a little bit, like just slightly, just like a little bit, and not like what I'm seeing. And it was just perceptible enough to me. And so I started looking in the mirror and shrugging and saying, you're okay. And like, that's kind of started the internal dialogue and the self-compassion that's there, that it's okay to feel, it's okay to be scared, and it's okay to have to work through this.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two things of what you've just said then that I really want to pick up on. And the first one is, there's a cliche, which is, if you don't love yourself, no one else will ever love you. And anyone who's ever got to a certain point in their life of not loving themselves will realize, actually, that's not true. There were people who loved me, like, for example, your kids. And like I was uncomfortably made this comment in front of my wife the other day, because I was like, I was loved by my first wife. I am loved by she hates it when I call her my current wife. It's like, it's my current wife, but I'll have a new one in like a few years. And the thing is, like, when people say that, if you don't love yourself, no one else will ever love you, it's not accurate. The accurate saying that we need to actually say is, if you don't love yourself, you will not be able to accept love from other people. It's not that they will not give it. It's not that they will not fall in love with you or they will not love you. It's that you will question it. Like what you said there, is that you looked at your kids and were like, how could you love such a piece of shit? And that's it. We need to work on kind of that next step now. And that is what you have a point of yours that I wanted to kind of pick up on. I love the fact that you say going for self-okay, because people fall into this idea. I think a lot of people fall into self-hatred as a prophylactic for not falling into being an egotist. It's like, we're told when we're kids, be humble, don't brag, don't show off.
Yeah.
And that's, and instead of there being a spectrum of that, there is on and off, which is, there is basically egotistical or self-deprecation, and there is nothing in between. And when you say to people, well, you need to love yourself, well, going from self-hatred to self-love is a vast jump. It's a huge jump. And it is the ultimate destination, but there is self-okay, self-like. Those are stations along the way, and different people take different amount of time to get to them. And you will get those people that you say it to and you go, wait, look, one of the biggest realization I ever had is self-esteem starts with self. It was a huge, stupid, obvious slap in the face when I twigged on that one. I'm like, I'm looking for everybody else to give me that approval. And then when that happened for me, I'm like, right, I best give myself my approval. And I took to it like a duck to water, to be honest. It was like a little bit hard at first, but then as soon as I realized it, I'm like, okay, you're really good at approving of other people. how about you give yourself a little slice of that? And I started giving myself a little slice of it. But obviously, different people have different levels of resistance to that there. And if they see someone go, oh, I've never seen it that way before, and I'm fixed now, and then their answer is, I'm struggling with this. I can barely even look at myself in the mirror and shrug my shoulders and say, you're all right, like what you're saying. It's like, it's figuring out the fact that we each have a journey on there, and we each have an amount of time or an amount of effort or work that it's going to take us to get from station to station, from self-hatred to maybe even self-loathing. It's like, I only loathe myself. I don't quite hate myself right now.
Yeah. And everything you just said, spot on, right? But that cycle, like, it's not like you just get there and you're done and you're there. You still have the cycle of falling into the comfortable routines, or even falling into being, I'm still hard on myself. One of my friends, he makes fun of me so much, he'll laugh at me and tells me, will you just take your foot off your neck for a second and appreciate like what you've done? And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I'm not taking that step back and appreciating. I'm still just like, I got to keep going. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we think we get to this point and that's it, I'm there. And that's what we hear a lot is you get there and you're there, but that's not the truth. We're human.
Yeah.
Things are going to bring us around and be in cycles. And so just understanding that goes a long way too with being able to heal.
100%. I think one thing as well as an extra layer on top of that is both of us being neurodivergent. I think neurodivergents are a little bit more like, ooh, shiny thing, I'm healed, I'm fixed, I'm okay now, everything's fine, and I'm going to be better forever. And then like it's the same as like when we go, oh, look, a new hobby, this is it, this is the one, I've found the one that I'm going to do forever. I can't believe it, my life is complete now. And no, it's complete for a period. And I very much fell into that. Like when I discovered a lot of that self-esteem stuff, and when I discovered like where some of my own core beliefs had come from, I felt fixed for a good 6 months. And in a way, I'm kind of glad that I wasn't, because I reckon I could have easily become like, the preachy ex-drinker or the preachy ex-smoker, the preachy ex-self-loathing person. I would have been like, it's like I mastered self-esteem and you should too. It's like, I think I could have easily become that person. So I'm glad that in a weird way that life continued to throw me curveballs and test that. And I'm glad that my depression didn't completely go away, because while it was gone away, I was getting very comfortable. Like I was getting very comfortable in the whole, I've overcome mental illness, so everybody else can. It's like, yeah. What we said before about the stations and like trying to get from one place to another, I was as we were talking about that, I was thinking is like, do you see that like in the recovery circle where someone looks at someone like yourself and you say, I'm 9 years sober now, and you get people that are early on in that sobriety journey and they say, oh, I'm never going to make 9 years, or I think like they feel almost inadequate because their sobriety's only just begun. It's like, is that a thing?
Oh yeah, all the time, especially in your first year. But as soon as people hear I'm 9 years, they're like, wow, I can't believe you made it. Like, that's amazing. I don't know if I'll ever make it that far. Like, you have so much more knowledge than me. And I'm like, no, I don't. Like, you have your story to share. You have knowledge in what you're going through. I may not have had to go through what you've gone through. I had to go through what I had to in order to get to where I am. But it's not about the time and it's not about the years. Like, sure, I didn't drink for 9 years, but I put all of myself into other external things. Like, I escaped through video games. I escaped through relationship, parenthood, career, especially career. So it's not like there's a perfect avenue for getting there. And because I started numbing my emotions at such a young age, I was able to continue to numb my emotions even after I quit drinking. It took a little bit more effort, definitely, and it took it was a lot more of uh, me kind of losing myself and who I was into just numbing and being on autopilot a lot of the time. But that doesn't mean that just because I'm at 9 years, like I've seen the light and like I'm exuding all this wisdom and things like that. Like it's a process to say the least.
Yeah. Were there, you've mentioned there a few, like, you were able to kind of like numb the feelings other ways. Was there any situations where you feel you replaced one addiction with another?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I would definitely say video games for a while, where every single night after work I'd come home. It was just me and my girlfriend at the time, and I'd play the first Destiny with my friends for 7, 8, 9 hours a night. Like, I mean, just a crazy amount. And I would be there, and it got to the point where that was my escape. And then I put it into work, where if that phone rang, I was going. And I felt responsible and obligated, like I had to. But looking back at it, I was escaping into my job and like putting my entire identity into that job. And that really was me replacing the alcohol with that for a little while, because it was just like covering up that low self-worth, or, negative self-worth that I felt like I had.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I had for sure.
During the 9 years, have there been times where it was harder than others? And if so, what did you do to overcome those things?
Oh, wow. Yeah. When you go out with people and you get very nervous, it's hard. I have found that breathing has worked. What I've done before is I'll just start a conversation with somebody about sports, and that'll take my mind off of it. That was in the past, especially. And if it got too much, I would just leave. I wouldn't say bye to anybody. I'd just leave.
I like doing that for no other reason than social anxiety.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many times now where I'll be like somewhat overloaded, just like, overworked, overstressed. And I'm like, I just got to go. I got to get out of here. And I don't feel bad about it. You just got to do what you got to do. But actually, like, my biggest trigger for craving alcohol has been being single. I have never been single and sober before.
Right.
So how do I date again sober? How do I meet people sober? There's a lot going into it, and that has brought up a lot of inner turmoil and thoughts around, well, I could probably drink and be okay, but I'm not going to. And that really has been. And then just getting over it is putting myself into situations where, it doesn't matter that I'm single. It doesn't matter that I'm sober, but just showing myself that I can do new things and I can do it without drinking has been, that's been an amazing like thing to see, is these new things that I'm doing. And I'm actually doing them fairly well for the short period of time that I'm doing it. That's done wonders for my self-worth, my confidence, and then just showing myself that I don't need the crutch.
Yeah, I was asking just simply because, like, I know that for me, I've never really had a single true addiction. I don't think. I've just done all of them, like, and the food one was probably the one that got the most time to be entrenched, because that started happening when I was about 12. And like, I had a very, very stressful weekend this weekend, and the very, very first thing I wanted to do was cover those feelings with food. Like that, even though I've not done that for such a long period of time, now. It's that instinct, that pull was very much there. And I used video games as a way to get out of it. And the same thing is, I looked at the fact that it's still achieving the same thing. What I wanted was a kind of escapism, a form of numbness, and I replaced one thing with another that was causing the numbness. But I kind of thought to myself, well, when it comes to repercussions of things, like if I will feel like I've relapsed more with the food, and I will feel like I know that internal demon that talks and says, you're binging again. It's like, you have binged. I train people this all the time. It's like, it's not I'm drinking again, it's I drank again, and tomorrow I will not drink again. It's like, it's not I'm drinking again, meaning I'm drinking now and I will continue to drink until some sort of life intervention comes along. But I know that voice is there, and it's really loud, and it was being very self-critical despite all the tools that I have in my toolbox. It was being horrendous to me yesterday. But yeah, it's for me, it's high stress. Whenever there's high periods of stress going on, it's my brain is right. Okay, let's reach for this. Let's reach for this. Let's reach for this.
And so that's when my ADHD actually reared its head. Like, I'd been able to live with my ADHD, knowing that I did absolutely, like, schoolwork, everything like that, knowing that I had it, but I've been able to work through it. And then I got a job that was physical, which is perfect for somebody with ADHD. It turns out I didn't quite know that at the time. My second child was a pleasant surprise, not so pleasant for quite a while until he was here. But there was so much stress between work, between home, having 2 kids under 2, having, I was really going through it with my parents at the time and my brother and sister, and just really feeling alone, not having an outlet. I didn't really have much for hobbies at the time, and I didn't have time for anything. I started to forget how to do simple tasks at work. I started to, and I mean, I'm talking about high voltage line tech. Like, you forget how to do something, you're not going home. So, yeah, big deal. Like, I forgot appointments for my ex-wife and like the baby. Like, I would be late. Couldn't tell you how long a task was going to take, and like, I was always misjudging time. Finally, I went in, got tested, and got onto some meds, and it helped. But when I started a stimulant about a year ago, it was like, whoa, like, I've been starting 20 yards behind everybody, and I didn't even realize it. Like, I cleaned the entire house in an hour and a half, and I felt like like, by the time I started to the time I got done, it felt like it'd been like 8 hours. It only been an hour and a half, and I'm like, oh, I got so much time to do stuff today. And so the stuff that I got done was just like unreal. And as I learned more about ADHD and how your brain works, like, it allows me to be more compassionate to myself, to give myself grace, but also to plan my life somewhat around it. Like, I put everything in my calendar with reminders. I put everything in my house is open. So like, I basically have bookshelves as my pantry, as my pots and pan area. So I know where things are, what I have at a glance. And it's harder for me to forget that I don't have something. And that my wardrobe too, I bought a wardrobe that's outside of a closet so that I can hang everything up and I can see what's there and I know what's there.
I just use a chair for that.
I mean,
the chair.
I do too, to a point, but it puts it up there a lot easier to put stuff away too. So things seem like they don't take as much energy as well. Like, tricking your brain into that.
Yeah.
That's been a big help for me as well.
Yeah. It's amazing what those little energy changes make. You said before you were having kind of you were struggling with your family and your brother at the time as well. And it's like when we're under like huge amounts of stress and wasting energy on little things, it's that can be the difference between a positive and a negative interaction. Is we go into it flustered, or we go into it like less patient. And like I've found that recently, with since returning to therapy in January, is that I was like using energy on all the wrong things. Like, the way I describe it is I was using all the background processes that were taking my CPU in my brain all the way up to 100, and I couldn't even account for why I was exhausted at the end of the day most of the time. And taking some of that energy back, it improved my interactions with my kids, and then when I had better interactions, because I had more energy going into my interactions with my kids, I had better interactions with my kids. So I came away from those interactions rather than feeling like a deadbeat dad who's just let them down, or the fact that my kids, or actually, to be fair, at the time I hadn't even taken accountability for it. I was thinking, my kids just don't get it. I'm tired from everything I'm doing in work. Why can't they just leave me alone? Mm-hmm. And I thought I felt completely justified in having that thought. And then I remembered back to the fact that, okay, I always said I learned how to not be a dad from my dad, because he'd see me for 2 hours a week, and quite often he was an engineer himself, so he was often on shifts, and he'd like go to sleep and just leave me looking after my sisters. And in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm not doing that. I'm doing better than that. But in reality, when my son came to me and was like, would you like a game of chess? I'd be like, no, I'm too tired. Can we do something like watch TV? And that was all I wanted to do. I may not, my dregs and my dad's dregs may have been relative. And, they compared them to each other. They don't sound like the same thing whatsoever. But to someone who's, to a son who's reaching out for connection, it was everything. And by changing some of that, so that I had energy to play a game of chess, or I had energy to go and walk the dog with him and have a deeper conversation, or that I could stay awake when we did watch TV, although that doesn't always happen still, that led to a better interaction. And I come away from that interaction feeling like connected rather than feeling disconnected. And then that then meant that the following day I'd wake up so much more full of energy, and then because I've not been thinking about dwelling on the fact that I was disconnected and all that. And it's these little tiny small gains that they all add up to something huge in the process. And, I can't undervalue that anymore.
I love how, that relation too, that you have the energy to be there for your kids. And that's something this past year that that has been heads and shoulders like the biggest gain that I've had is being a better parent, being more present. And I have really young kids, so they're learning their emotions. Well, I'm 36 years old. I'm learning my emotions too. But I can't tell them that. I can't, I want to be there for them more and be better with their emotions than what I had. And so learning my emotions, it's allowed me to handle their temperaments more. A lot of the time when they're throwing a tantrum or they're really mad and saying hurtful things, like, they want a hug. They want that connection. And being able to talk with both of them, like, what are you feeling? Kind of explaining some of the differences and some intricacies. Like, okay, you're mad. Are you annoyed? Are you frustrated? Are you, let's try and figure out what it is. And a couple months ago, my oldest was really mad, and we just started with the parenting plan 7 days, and then 7 days. And he knew that he was going to his mom's for 7 days. And I was dropping him off, and he was not acting like himself and being angry and combative. And finally, I asked him, what's wrong? Like, are you sad? Why are you mad? And he said, well, I want my toy that I forgot. And I was like, oh, I'll go get it. And then he said, no, I don't want you to leave. I don't want you to leave at all. And I was like, oh, that's what this is. Okay. So I picked him up and carried him out in the hall. And I sat down next to him and I cried with him. And I said, I don't want to leave either. I miss you. And we hugged and we sat there for about 5 minutes crying together. And I said, it's okay to be sad and it's okay to cry. It's okay to tell someone you're sad. And then after he was ready, we got up and he walked right in and he said bye to me. And I walked out still crying and proud, because a year ago, there's no way I would have been able to do that. Recognize that, be there with him, be comfortable with myself and my emotions, to allow him to express his emotions. Like, you know, that's a lesson that I'm still learning it. And every time I tell people it, they kind of have that, that brain explosion kind of moment where if somebody's expressing an emotion and you feel like really uncomfortable to the point that you got to leave, is it because you don't want to feel that emotion and you're not comfortable with yourself to be with that emotion? And
yeah, not even
every single time
leave.
People are honest, it is for sure.
Not even need to leave. Like, it can be that there's a right and a wrong time to kind of make light of emotions, you know? And like, you can make a joke about things sometimes, but some people literally make those jokes and try to lighten the moment 100% of the time. And all that happens, like, well, I'll use a slightly different example of this. Is I'm quite a ready to cry kind of person. Like, a lot of the time, I have a box of tissues on my desk for reasons, but I'm ready to cry like a lot of the time. There's one of my friends says that she could cry at the opening of an envelope, and I'm like about 2 steps behind her, you know. And my wife was never used to that. Like, you know, she grew up in Latvia, a land of hard men and harder women. It's like, and
oh yeah,
yeah, exactly. And she wasn't used to that in the slightest. So whenever I said I feel like crying, she'd say, "Oh, don't cry." Now, saying "don't cry" would make me want to cry 10 times more. Whereas nowadays she goes, "It's all right, cry if you want," and I'm like, okay, I will, but actually I think I'm okay. And it's just having those emotions validated. Have you ever read the book Tuesdays with Morrie?
No.
Tuesdays with Morrie. It's by the author Mitch Albom, and it's a true story. And Morrie Schwartz was a guy who was his former college professor, and he was dying of ALS. And basically he invited Mitch out to come and like sit with him on a Tuesday and like talk about life, love, philosophy, you know, put some of his ideas down onto paper. And one of the first lessons that he gives Mitch is to feel the emotions all the way through. And that one still sits with me. Like, I reread that book every now and then. And the idea of it being is that feeling an emotion all the way through is, if you're grieving, fully grieve. If you're upset about leaving your son behind, or your son's upset about you leaving him behind, fully feel that, because actually that's how you process it. That's your body's your body's amazingly natural at dealing with its emotions. If we'd never have learned, or learned bad habits about dealing with our emotions, if we've never learned how to suppress them in the first place, we would just live them. We just, you know, crying is there for a reason. Like, when I had the news yesterday that, you know, my kids were moving away, I wailed. Like, and it wasn't like there was nobody in the house. It wasn't done for a performative reason or anything like that. It wasn't done to show anybody else how sad I was. Those were the noises that just needed to come out of me. And in a way, I was kind of glad that there was no one in the house, because I may have suppressed that a little bit, or what. And I mean, and I was very glad as well I didn't hear the news in front of the kids, because, you know, I don't want them to feel guilty about what I was feeling or anything like that. I wanted so, but those emotions, and you know, they started the work of taking care of themselves. I felt that all the way through. I'm feeling it all the way through still. But I know that coming out the other side of that those emotions are going to feel more done Not that they'll ever fully be done, but they'll feel more done than they would have done if I'd have just pushed them to one side. And I remember you saying something last week, or it might have been the week before when we were doing the podcast to get on your podcast. By the way, for all the listeners, I will be plugging this at the end, but Untapped Keg podcast, it's very, very good. For those of you who are not on audio, who are just on audio, should I say, RJ is holding up the T-shirt right now. If you're just on audio, you're missing out on two things. One, his T-shirt saying Untapped Keg, and two, this fantastic T-shirt that I'm wearing with so many, many different autumn-coloured cartoon bears. By the way,
it's the Cuddle Bear shirt. I'm excited to, cuddle after this with you.
This T-shirt is a step in that self-loathing, self-locate, self-liking journey. Is the fact that actually there's only been one person that has disapproved of this T-shirt so far, and it was my wife. But historically, that would have been enough. Like, I'm not the type of person to buy it to spite her. I didn't buy it to spite her. I bought it because I saw it. I loved it. I woke up the next morning still thinking about it. And then I was like, I am buying this for me. And when it came, I was so happy. And now the shirt has somehow managed to completely distract me from what point I was even trying to make, and the camp. And so if you can remember, that'd be great.
It was this is actually a callback to the podcast. So you were talking about something that I mentioned last time we chatted.
Yeah, and you said something about like there's parts, you're at the stage of your emotions now where you need to feel them, and you need to but you don't always feel like you can feel them in front of the kids. And I think there's a time and a place. And I think people, when they discuss this, it lacks nuance. Some people are like, you can't show your children your emotions, period. And other people are, you should show your children all of your emotions. And just like with the whole self-loathing versus self-love, there's lots of steps in between. Yeah. I think there's a time and a place. I think especially for neurodivergence, we're taught masking your emotions is bad. Masking them 100% of the time is bad. Letting them out 100% of the time, is it bad? I wouldn't say it's overall bad, but I would say it can be. And I think there is a certain privilege that comes along with being able to when the time is right. But my point to you, because I'm going off on 46 tangents, as I'm known to do, but my point to you was the fact that, you were saying you didn't feel like you could, show that side of it. But this is an example there where, you showed that side of it to your son, and you both really connected for it. And like, it's not going to make, some people might think, oh, well, if you're crying with your kids, it's going to make them cry babies and all the rest of it. No, it's not. It's just going to let them know that when they do need to cry, it's okay. It's not going to make someone need to cry when they don't normally. It's like,
yeah.
What's more weird, like not crying over anything or crying a little bit too easily? It's like,
It's funny that you say that, because from the time I was 12 to the time to last year, really last year, probably September actually, I cried 5 times. I can name all the times. When I found out my grandpa passed away, I didn't cry until I was driving down for his funeral a week later. And then I was told that my emotions are awfully convenient. So yeah, that makes me want to express my emotions to someone who says that when I'm crying because my grandpa, it's real. Now, like, I don't pick, like, because I had suppressed so much for so long. I broke my wrist twice and I didn't cry. I went back into the game and I finished the game. Basketball. The only reason I came out of basketball was I couldn't shoot. I had no strength in my wrist. And then the second time I finished the baseball game, or, as you call it, rounders. We call
baseball.
Okay. So I couldn't grip the bat with this hand. It would have been this hand. I just was swinging with one hand. But I still finished and I played the game. And I was still told that because I went to the doctor and got x-rays that I was a wuss, right? And so
it's unreal. Going
through so much of this life that you're not allowed to show. The only emotion you're allowed to show, you're not even allowed to show happiness or joy or excitement. You're only allowed to show anger. That's what it was. Anger and laughter. Like, that's it. In my family, that was it. It's difficult, but going back to the podcast too, and talking about finding the harmony in showing your emotions, letting them in. That is something that has been a line to walk. I've let my boys see me cry quite a few times this year, and they ask me, and sometimes it's been because I'm proud of them and I'm happy, and I tell them, Daddy's really happy right now, and I'm really proud of what you two are doing. So I'm just crying because I'm so happy, and sometimes it's been sad, and Daddy's sad right now. Daddy just has some emotions that has Daddy feeling a little bit sad. So I'm just crying because I don't want them to not know what it's like to feel their emotions or see their emotions processed.
Yeah.
And then, another thing that I like to tell them too is, not just that I love them, but that they make me happy, but they make me happy not by trying to be anything other than who they are. You just do what makes you happy, and that makes Daddy happy. And, I'll tell them, you just be, your name, and you just be your name. And that's all you ever have to be for Daddy. And Daddy's going to love you, and I'm going to be proud of you no matter what. And that leads to, honestly, like I don't have to really enforce discipline. And I'm not saying like the way that I'm parenting is perfect or that there's not things to do, but it's like finding the harmony piece where find the harmony, you got to have kind of some set guidelines, but you don't have to be like super enforce it every single time. And it's the same with emotions. Like, you don't have to show them 100% of the time. But if they, like you were saying earlier, where you might be tired or frustrated and it's coming out directed at somebody that you don't mean for it to be directed to, okay, I need to explore why is it that I am not showing up 100%? Why is it that I'm more frustrated and annoyed than I would like to be with my kids?
Yeah.
And just doing that self-inventory and that process, that's something that I wouldn't have had the vocabulary, the understanding to do a year ago. And it's been really accepting that it's okay to be wrong, that it's actually like good that I'm wrong, because let's try something new. And if I'm wrong about what I was doing before, great. I'm trying something new that might work better. If I'm wrong about the new thing being better, great. Now I know what I was doing before will, help me do better going forward, right? So it's all part of learning, and just that curiosity that I've found is like my curiosity and creativity is my core values. Like, when I named that and I went back to being curious, like that was when I was the most happy in life, was when I was curious. Like, what is there to explore in life? Would I like doing this, trying new foods, just trying new hobbies, started yoga, Tai Chi, Kung Fu, different things. And like you were saying earlier too, I started I've redone my wardrobe 3 times in the past year, and I'm starting to wear things that I would have gotten ridiculed for and then stopped wearing them. And I'm just going to wear them. And guess what? I enjoy wearing them. So the outside, what I'm putting out into the world right now, like with my outward appearance, more aligns with what I feel inside. Yeah. And that's really why I did that. It's not because I want to show people look good for the validation. It's because I want to show how I feel inside. And that's a really massive difference from where I was before.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that I love the fact that you keep reminding me about that harmony thing, because it was one of those realizations that I had in the gym, that it's not about balance, it's about harmony. It's about the two things working well in collaboration with each other, and it is just remembering where it comes in, like the harm, like we talked before. It was like the harmony of the showing your emotions versus having those moments where you hold back. Like I love making links to music, because I was a musician from the age of 6, and if you were just constantly playing notes 100% of the time, like it becomes like a drone, it becomes a noise. It's There's the space between, and there's gaps, there's pauses, there's rhythm to it all and everything. And I think it's always an ongoing journey for where that is at that time as well, in terms of, like, I mean, I say with parenting, is like, if someone was to say, if you got 18 years of experience parenting, I'd be like, nope, I've got 1 year of experience of an 18-year-old and 1 year of experience with a completely different 16-year-old. And if I was to try to be the exact same parent to each of them, then I'm not going to work in harmony with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not. It's like I'm not working off their note. I'm working off, here's how I want things to be, and there has to be a certain degree of flexibility, and there has to be a degree of your kids teach you. It's
Oh, goodness. Oh, yes. The greatest mirrors that you will ever find. Your kids.
They are. So, bringing it back into talking about coaching, what I would like to do, at least because we've got about 10 minutes left or so before we wrap this up, is so alcohol-free life coaching. Is that the coach is alcohol-free, or the clients are alcohol-free, or both?
Both. So
coaching for people who want to live an alcohol-free life.
I would say and it's somewhat of a, what do you call yourself in this, right? Because a lot of times in sobriety, we're still living our life around alcohol.
Yeah.
So how can we find our freedom from that alcohol? So like, that's where the alcohol free kind of comes in. Maybe I should call it free from alcohol life coach or something like that. But I want you to tell me what your goal is. Mm-hmm. Do you just want to decrease the amount that you drink? Do you want to be alcohol free? Are you sober and you're like, I just cannot go to places that have alcohol and feel comfortable there. So, I want you to be able to live your life how you want and not fear this drink that is there. And that doesn't mean you're never going to be like, oh, I really do want some alcohol. I just want to not feel anything, right? And that escape. That is still going to happen, unfortunately. That's just part of the nature of it. But we can, working through what is going on in your life and getting you to a place where you can reevaluate your relationship with alcohol in a healthy way, and not shame yourself or guilt yourself because you had a drink, because you had a craving, because of all of things are going poorly in your life, or things are really hard right now. And so you're struggling. Like, how can we take these things and just work on the next thing that you can do, and give you the support that you might need? And that a lot of the time we can see the forest through the trees, or we can see the trees in the forest, but we have some disconnect in trying to see both, depending on what's going on. And so having that outside voice that can take a look at both and tell you, that you're doing a good job, you're doing the best that you can, and allowing you to make the goals and where you want to get, no matter what it is, to help you get through there.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I can't wait to see how you get on with it. I think it's going to be amazing. Is there anything else that the questions haven't led you towards that you'd like to drop him?
I think just being more compassionate to your feelings and your emotions, and don't worry so much about identifying what exactly it is that you're feeling or why right now, and just allow yourself to feel it. And that's part of being human, is feeling your emotions. And even though you might have been taught and still do push things to the side and push things down and have shame around feeling anything, it all adds up. And when it comes, it ends up being incredibly painful.
Yeah.
And if you just allow yourself to feel, and you kind of are able to later on possibly think about, why was I feeling that way? Or instead of in the moment, it helps you to, like you said, move towards where you're headed instead of getting stuck off on a fork that isn't necessary.
Yeah.
And it's through, it's not around, it's not over, it's not under, it really is through. And if you have a community and some people that can offer you some support, do it, because it sucks doing it alone. And as somebody who still does not reach out when he should,
You're talking about yourself.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. And people will be there for you. And if you reach out and they're not, if they say they just don't have the capacity right now, that's okay. There's somebody else that you can ask. So, and that's really brave too.
Yeah, absolutely. RJ, where can people find more about you / contact you and all of that fun stuff?
You can go to untappedkeg.com. You'll find a lot about the podcast there. And then very soon, later this month, you'll find coaching. If you would like to, explore and see if an alcohol-free life coach is something that you can benefit from. If you go to any of the socials and you look up Untapped Keg, you'll find me. And on TikTok, it's Untapped Keg RJ. Because on my phone, I was logged into my own personal, and it's just easier to use that. So Untapped Keg anywhere. And if you reach out on the socials, all my DMs are open. I will get back to you as soon as I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining me.